Badge up to it.
My Lords, I think there's been some excellent speeches so far. I thought that Lord Allen of Hallam actually brilliantly laid out and explained why these amendments matter. And I actually thought that the Noble Lord Moylan just now also explained why this has got some great popular interest outside of this House. Not everything that goes on in this House is of interest, and people do not study all of the Noble Lord Moylan's speeches, even though they're in the public sphere all of the time. But this particular group of amendments has elicited a huge amount of discussion. And I think that we should remember that encrypted chat has become an indispensable part of the way that we live in this country and around the world. It is, as somebody said, it's replaced the old-fashioned wired telephone, according to the Open Rights Group, a rather quaint phrase. But I do think that the fact that citizens of the United Kingdom think that chat services matter so much that it represents, and they're used by 60% of the total population, should make us think, what are we doing in relation to these services? End-to-end encryption, as the most secure form of encryption available, means that your messages are stored on your phone, and people feel that they're in control because they're not on some server somewhere. You actually think, that's good. Even WhatsApp can't read your WhatsApp messages. That's the point of encryption, by the way, right? So that's why people use it. And they're secured with a lock, and only the recipient and you have that special key to unlock and read them. I mean, obviously, there are certain problems. Certain government ministers, wanted to share voluntarily the whole of their WhatsApp messages, and if you were in that group, you might have thought that was a rather rude thing to do, and share it with a journalist who then shared it with the rest of us, and people have their WhatsApp messages leaked all the time. But actually, when it happens, we all go, oh my God, I'm glad I wasn't in that WhatsApp group, because you assume a level of privacy, even though you also, as a grown-up, need to know that somebody might leak them. But the main thing is that they are a secure form of conversation that's widely used, and everyone has a right to private conversations. I was thinking about the way that when we had social society closed down during the lockdown period, we needed, didn't we, technology in order to communicate with each other. We understood that we needed to WhatsApp our friends and family or Zoom them or whatever. And the idea that that would in any way be of a matter for the state listening in would have appalled us. We considered that our private life. So we want to be able to chat in confidence. We want to be confident that only ourselves and the recipients can see what we're sharing and hear what we're saying. And I think that that's true of everyday life, but there's obviously very good cases to be made for its importance in terms of everyone from Iranian women resisting the regime, communicating all of the civil liberties organisations around the world who use WhatsApp. The security of knowing that you can speak without Putin watching in, or the possibility that President Xi will be sent your WhatsApp message, is important. But the government keeps assuring us that we're not to worry, but the bill does give Ofcom the power to require services to install tools that would require surveillance of encrypted communications for example, child exploitation and terrorism content. And advocates claim that this is just not possible. People on my side claim it's just not possible without undermining encryption per se. Because once you install tools for scanning for certain content, it's a little bit like those people who sort of say, you can't be half pregnant. I mean, you can't be half encrypted. There is a danger here that I think that we say, oh no, we're only doing it for those things, but actually you're attacking encryption per se. Unlike the noble Baroness Bennett of Manor Castle, I know nothing about this technically, as you'll see from the way that I'm speaking about it. But I can see from a common sense point of view what encryption is, and you can't just say, oh, we're only going to use it a little bit. That's my point. Now, I just wanted to tackle, because I know it sort of lurks around here, the issue of child abuse. Because this is what really motivates when people say, well, as long as you can deal with that, And it is put forward as a proposed solution in terms of encrypted chats services that send messages of that nature, and what can we do about it. And of course, I want to stress that child exploitation and child abuse and images and so on are abhorrent, and that is very important background to this conversation. But I also wanted to draw attention, because it's sort of been referred to in an earlier group. What are we prepared to do about child abuse? And I suppose I'm nervous that we're promising a silver bullet through this bill, that it will all be solved through some of these measures. So I noted that Professor Ross Anderson, the University of Cambridge, said, "We cannot expect artificial intelligence to replace police officers, teachers and social workers in child protection. The idea that complex social problems are amenable to cheap technical solutions is the siren song of software salesmen and has lured many a gullible government department onto its rocks." And I think that's really true, that most child abuse happens offline. What happens online, that is child abuse, needs to be dealt with. But I do worry that we are actually going to, in the end, try and say to people, don't worry, all will be well, because we're dealing with the online safety bill. Yeah.
Give way for a moment. Yeah. Thank you. I just want to say there is no one in this room, there is no one standing behind us who speak up for children who thinks this is going to be a silver bullet. That is not an acceptable position to suggest that we take. Secondly, I actually am going to say much child abuse does take place offline and then is put online, but the exponential way in which it is consumed, created and spread is entirely new because of the services that we are talking about. And when we get later in committee, I will be bringing forward some of the new ways in which it is creating child abuse, new forms, new technologies, new abuse. So I am really sorry to interrupt the noble lady. I have made my feelings quite clear that I'm actually not an end-to-end encryption breaker, but there are many, many, many things, and some of them, I believe, come up later in the name of Lord Russell, safety by design, and so on. And also, I will agree with her, as part of my intervention, that we need a great deal more resources for police, for teachers, for social workers, and so on in this area. But please, I do not want child sexual abuse to be a football in this conversation.
With the noble lady, which is precisely why I'm suggesting that we consider, and it's difficult, I feel awkward saying it, whether privacy should be sacrificed totally in relation to how it's being argued in relation to encryption, whether we need to consider that. And when I mentioned the silver bullet, I wasn't talking about the noble Baroness or necessarily people here. But I have heard people say, we need this online safety bill because it will deal with child abuse. And I'm, in this group of amendments, I'm raising the fact that when I've talked about encryption with people outside of this House, they've said, well, we do need to do something to tackle the fact that these messages are being sent around. It's not just child abuse, it's also terrorism, right? There's a range of difficult situations. And things can go wrong with this, and that's what I was trying to raise. You know, we have a situation where some companies consider or are being asked to use machine learning to detect nudity, for example. And just last year, a father lost his Google account and was reported to the police for sending a naked photo of their child to the doctor for medical reasons. And I'm just raising these things as problems that we have to consider. Child abuse is so abhorrent that, for example, we will do anything to protect children. But let me ask you this, and this is where the privacy comes. Children are largely abused in their home, but as far as I understand it, we are not as yet arguing that the state should put CCTV cameras in every home for 24/7 surveillance in order to stop child abuse. And that doesn't mean that we're glib or that we don't understand the importance of child abuse. It means that we say, oh no, that's the privacy of your home, and you have then specialist services that, when they think there's a problem, intervene. And I'm worried about the possibility of putting a CCTV camera in everyone's phone, which is what I think would be the danger of going down this route. And then my final point is just that I do think that these services will potentially leave the UK, right, WhatsApp. And I do think it's important to note that. I agreed with Lord Allen. This isn't like sort of like I threaten I'm going to storm off. I don't think it's done in any kind of peak or it's done in that way. If there's enormous pressure put on to scan communications of these platforms, they are global platforms and they have a system that works for billions of people all around the world. And a relatively small market like the UK is not something that they would compromise those billions of their users from around the world. And they, just like they have explained, they would not put up with that if the Chinese state said we have to see people's messages, right? They would just say, we're an encrypted service, right? And they walk out of China and we all go, well done. Well, I would just say that, oh, sorry. I would just say that I think that there is a real strong possibility they will leave the UK, so we have to be very careful.
To add actually to the exchange actually with Baroness Kidron and the noble lady Baroness Fox referred to WhatsApp's position. Again, I think it's quite important for the public out there also to understand that, look, if someone sends you illegal material, particularly child sexual abuse material, and I agree with Baroness Kidron, that is a real problem, and you report it to WhatsApp, and WhatsApp has a reporting system, it's no longer encrypted. It's sent in clear text and WhatsApp will give it to the police. And one of the things I'm suggesting is, rather than drive them out of the country, because I think they're at the more responsible end of the spectrum, can we work with them to improve those kind of reporting systems to put the fear of God into people so they know, like, this is not cost-free. And just as a coda on that, if you ever receive something like that, you should report it to the police straight away because you are liable. Once it's on your phone, you've got a problem. So the message from here should be, if you receive it, report it. If it's reported, make sure it gets to the police, and we should be encouraging services to put those systems in place.
Concluded with my conclusion, which was to say they will be driven out, but that is not because they are irresponsible about when horrible messages or dangerous messages, but they don't read our messages because they're private messages. But if we ever receive anything that makes us feel uncomfortable, they should be put under pressure to act. And many of them do already and actually are very responsible, but we could make that. That's very different than demanding that they scan our messages and we breach that privacy.
Last exchange was incredibly helpful, and I'm very grateful